Good evening, and welcome to the 2020 Stevenson Lecture. The Stevenson Fellowship is named in honor of Governor, two-time presidential candidate, and United Nations Ambassador Adlai Stevenson II, Choate class of 1918, and was established to bring speakers to campus who have made a distinguished contribution to public life and who will inspire students to consider public service in its many forms. Before introducing our Stevenson Senior Fellow, we want to share with you a little more about Adlai Stevenson's life and work. So our first speaker this evening is the 2020 Stevenson Junior Fellow, sixth former Roshni Surpur. A resident of Lewis House who hails from Union City, New Jersey, Roshni has served our school in Gold Key, The Fringe, Jabali Wali, and as a representative to this year's Student Diversity Leadership Conference. Please join me in welcoming Roshni.
So as you know, tonight's lecture series is named after Adlai Stevenson II, who graduated Choate in 1918. Although he graduated over 100 years ago, his legacy on this campus still lives on. He was a theater kid as he performed in productions of The Rivals and New Gymnasium. He was a writer and business manager for the Choate News. He was a leader as fifth form secretary-treasurer, and he was an athlete, ranked third on the tennis team. He was very outspoken because on a campus of 200 students, he was one of 3 Democrats on campus. He lived in Hill House, he loved having political conversations with his roommate, and he was crushing on a girl named Dougie Hay, a student from Rosemary Hall. His friends described him as one of the world's greatest leaders. His teachers described him as a born scholar. The head of school believes he loved politics because he loved people. But to truly examine Stevenson's legacy, we must consider his life as a whole. As we examine Stevenson's life at Choate and beyond, we could learn from his accomplishments, but also his mistakes. After Choate and his time at Princeton, Stevenson served as the governor of Illinois, where he fought against political corruption, improved the Illinois state constitution, and provided more aid for schools. After his term in Illinois, he ran for presidency, not because he wanted to, but he was nominated twice. Early in his political career, he was asked if he wanted to be president, and Adlai responded, "I'd rather not." But when nominated by the American people in 1952, he took up the challenge because of his passion to serve others. While we recognize his zeal for public policy and his inspiring legacy, we must also recognize the consequences of some of his actions. For example, in his commencement speech given to Smith College, an all-women's college, he tells the graduates, "You will all assume the humble role of a housewife, which statistically speaking is what most of you are going to be, whether you like it or not, just not yet. Imagine working hard to obtain your degree only for your commencement speaker to tell you that you're ready to be a housewife." Stevenson was admired for how progressive he was. Yet here is an example in which he literally told educated women to go back to the kitchen. Although the sexist speech was in the mid-1950s, sexism 70 years ago is still sexism. Similarly, with the Brown versus Board of Education, the Supreme Court case that desegregated schools, Stevenson called himself a gradualist when he was actually a segregationalist. He wanted gradual desegregation, as he believed we should respect the South's long-standing tradition of segregation and separation based on race. It was as if he said, "I believe in equality, just not yet." However, this was also the theme of the Student Diversity Leadership Conference that I attended last December. The theme was 1954-2019, with all deliberate speed. This theme reflected on the vague phrasing, "with all deliberate speed," in the decision of Brown versus Board of Education, which made desegregation more of a leisure activity and gave segregationalists more time to resist the ruling. While segregation is not legal today, the effects, even 66 years later, are still very alive. For example, Students of color are overrepresented in public schools and underrepresented in private schools. Choate's student of color percentage is 38%. The national average in private schools is 31%, but in public schools, it's 67%. Some may say that Choate's student of color percentage is really high and that we're doing a good job because we are higher than the national average. But the national average is based on the fact that in this country, white students are getting a better education than students of color. Adlai Stevenson would not call himself a racist or sexist person, but we are still experiencing the consequences of his actions today. The ideology behind segregation manifests itself into the discrepancies that we see within race and public versus private schools today. Marietta Tree was a member of the United Nations Committee for Human Rights, and it was appointed this position by another one of our most notable alumni, JFK. Marietta Tree responded to Adlai's view on gradualism as, he thought of all Negroes as being lovable, old family retainers, and not as individuals like you and me, who are longing to get educated and who had aspirations and dreams just like the rest of us. Stevenson did not understand the urgency of equality. He believed in gradual equality, which means he did not actually believe in equality. He wanted equality eventually, but we needed it then and we still need it now. Stevenson had many positions of power. He was the governor of Illinois, he was a member of the UN, and he was nominated for presidency twice. He's one of our most notable alumni. Tonight's lecture series is named after him. If you walk into Archbold, you can see a bust of JFK on the right and Adlai Stevenson on the left. Stevenson had many positions of responsibility, but how did he use them? He made many advances in international relations, civil rights, and in the public sphere. However, his actions were underlyingly racist in the Brown versus Board of Education verdict and outwardly sexist at the Smith College graduation. And we as a society are currently facing the consequences of his actions. And tonight's speaker, Heather McGee, is going to be discussing the impact of racism and its social and political effects. And a part of that is Adlai Stevenson's legacy. Stevenson wasn't marching with the KKK, and he wasn't a devout racist, but he didn't realize that his actions and the consequences of his actions were. That could even be true for some of us as well. We may not claim to be racist, sexist, homophobic, and so on, but like Mr. Blant mentioned today, many of us may not realize that our actions can be discriminatory, or that we are bystanders to systems that are discriminatory. We know Stevenson's legacy is a complicated one, but his transcript isn't what captures his accomplishments and persona. However, his legacy lies in what he did with his Choate education. Stevenson was in the same seats you were in 1914. Not these seats in Colony Hall. I mean, he didn't get to see John Legend. But metaphorically, you will have positions of power where you can influence others. You have and will continue to have the ability to make a difference. Whether it's in 3 months or 3 years, you will get a Choate diploma. Now you know what Adlai Stevenson did with his Choate education. What are you going to do with yours?
Thank you, Roshni.